Welcome to Two Button Crew. This is a very special episode. I'll introduce the crew first. I'm Scott, and I have Simeon.
Hello.
And we've got Glenn as well. How's it going, Glenn?
It's going well. How are you?
Doing great. Okay, I'll introduce our special guests. We have the brothers Michael and Matthew Taranto. How are you guys?
Hey, everyone. We're doing well.
Doing good.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's a real honor to meet you and get a chance to ask you about the comics that you've made, the video games that you've made, and now you're getting into books. So we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about.
Sure.
So I don't know when you guys started reading Brawl in the Family. I actually started maybe a couple weeks after it started, and I was always excited to log on. I think I found out through like Game FAQs or something like that. And I'm super excited to talk to you guys. It picked up steam quite a bit, and you guys became relatively popular. What factors do you attribute the comic success to?
That's pretty cool that you learned about it like that early, because on Game FAQs, that was I think the second message board I posted it on. It was right after the IGN boards, and that was like in April 2008, I believe, and it was like kind of one after the other. I posted on one message board, and then people liked it, so like an hour later I posted on Game FAQs. But I guess the comic success, I think, if you kind of follow the trajectory of webcomics, like when it was a new thing, it was really cool because people were like, I could just put up whatever comic I want on the internet and say what I want, say whatever things I need. And for a while, that level of freedom was the appeal. You could have these very uncensored comics compared to what you'd normally find in the funnies. But I think with Brawl in the Family, it started with these doodles that I just kind of made in class that I thought were kind of funny, and it kind of had the opposite thing. It was less about seeing how far you could push it and more about what would be kind of like funny for this character, or like an in-character thing for this comic idea or whatever, so that you could still see the characters kind of doing this kind of thing, on their off time. And I think that kind of helped it reach a wider audience. And I've had a lot of people over the years also tell me they're glad to be able to have comics or webcomics that they can share with their kids or their younger siblings or what have you as well. So I think that was a big part of it. And also I think I had just reached a certain audience of Nintendo fans that wanted to see more Nintendo-based stuff, because that's kind of its own little thing too, its own little corner of gaming that I've always been a part of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed that your webcomics look a little bit different than other webcomics as far as just art style. And I'm wondering how much of that is art style, how much of that is the program that you use. I don't know anything about art or drawing comics. What's your process for drawing a comic?
Initially, it was just kind of anything goes with the... I had this little tablet where... you draw on it and then it appears on the computer screen. So you're kind of looking up the whole time. And that kind of combined with the very, I guess, droll sense of humor of especially the early comics, it kind of led to this really kind of wiggly looking blue outline that I sort of liked, because it was very easy to hammer out a few comics. My actual drawing skills, I think, were kind of better than the comic would have you believe, at least at first. So for a while... after a while, I started to try a little harder with the art and, not have it lose its kind of simple edge, but at least kind of grow a little bit bigger into something slightly more pleasant to look at. But it wasn't really like a conscious effort on my part for the most part. I think early on, I decided I liked the blue monochrome kind of look and mostly stuck with that. But otherwise, it's pretty much just kind of always been my own personal, doodling style throughout my life.
Is there a specific formula that you typically follow for your comics?
Yeah, I'm wondering about like story progression, because it seems like you're really good at a 3-panel setup with the payoff at the end. Do you have that kind of formula in mind, or is it just coming naturally?
I think it's a little tricky to kind of pinpoint where the ideas come from. It usually starts, or at least back when I was doing Brawl in the Family, it started when I'd be playing a game or something and notice something unusual or some mechanic that is a little strange. Like, I don't know, Mario jumps on the P block and it turns all the bricks into coins. And then I'll start thinking like, that's kind of weird. Like what's the range of that? Like, does it affect the castle? Does it affect other bricks around him? What if he took it into a brick store? What if he took it into blah, 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 And then I start playing around with that idea. And I think, okay, what's the best way to end, a strip with that sort of realization? And then that would become like Mario steps on the P block and the castle explodes into coins, and that would be a comic, So a lot of times it was just something as simple as that. Like I'd play a game and notice something unusual. And then other times, I'll sit there with my sketchbook for hours drawing out things and ideas, and I just don't like any of them. So it's really, it's a little tricky because sometimes it'll be really easy to come up with ideas, and other times it'll be, I could spend an evening and come up with nothing.
So, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
So, something I was wondering was, and probably not so much early on, but did you ever get to a point where you were thinking, okay, I've done a lot of Mario comics lately, maybe I should do other comics? Was that a consideration or a balance between retro observational humor and more recent games?
Yeah, actually, that was something that I would keep in mind because, with Nintendo, you have all these different series, you have all these different franchises, and each one kind of has their own little, their own little subculture of sorts. So if after a while I'm thinking okay, I'm doing a lot of Kirby comics or a lot of Mario comics, it's time to mix it up a little bit. What I often did was I'd have a buffer of 5 or 6 comics, in various stages of completion, and I might stagger out how they would release. If I had 3 Pokemon comics, I wouldn't want to do them all in a row. Usually, I'd switch them around and stuff just to keep the variety kind of fresh, I guess.
So you mentioned that you would start these ideas and some of them wouldn't pan out. So There's a lot of comics that didn't quite make it. Are there any favorite ideas that you had that you really wanted to make happen but ended up on the cutting floor anyway?
Probably a few. I remember for one of the books, it was either 2 or 3, I'm not sure, but I did do a set of I went through my sketchbook and looked at ideas I didn't use for whatever reason, and I drew up some of them in slightly more completed form and kind of explained what they were, why I didn't use them, and a few of those I really liked. I'm trying to think of some that weren't that though. Some of them were probably not quite appropriate enough. So I called those Brawl out of the family comics. And I'm trying to remember some of those. There was one with a thwomp and something.
Yeah, the infamous thwomp one you keep referencing.
I keep mentioning the thwomp. All right, I'll describe the thwomp one. It's not horrible or anything, but it's is a little out there. All right, so Mario, how did it go? Mario walks into a castle, and there's a thwomp. He's doing this thing. And it's what's going on? I'm nowhere near this guy. What's going on? So the thwomp keeps smashing down. So Mario just kind of runs under him as normal. And the camera pans out, and it turns out there's an upside down girl thwomp over the ground where Mario just runs. So maybe we're not gonna do the girl thwomp.
Glenn, do you know how to put the little red E explicit on this episode?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
That was one of the ones I decided maybe not. Maybe. I think there was another one where Kirby is eating a bunch of food or whatever, and Adelaine comes up and she's like, Kirby, how can you do that when there's starving kids across the world? And then last panel, he's eating the starving kids instead.
Oh, God.
I'm maybe not the best idea. So,
wow.
So yeah, I held off. But most of the ones I didn't use were just were more along the lines of this gag isn't quite doesn't quite read clearly enough, or this is too obscure, because some of them are based off super old NES games and such. So.
were there like, have you ever played a game that isn't like a Nintendo game and had like it's like, ah man, this would make a good Brawl in the Family strip, but it's not Nintendo, so I can't use it. Have you ever had that?
That's a pretty good question, because I've had like a PlayStation 2. We have a PlayStation 4 right now, and I've played I played Resident Evil 2. That was really fun. Persona was another one that I really liked. I think I thought of some, but I feel like I've done some non-Nintendo comics, but it might just be games that are like playable on Nintendo systems, but not Nintendo. I'm trying to think now.
Well, Matthew, you did Final Fantasy VII. I think, didn't you do like cloud stuff, or you were thinking about doing cloud stuff before?
Cloud shows up in the Waluigi book at one point, but it's not really Final Fantasy specific. But I, off the top of my head, I can't really think of a full comic idea I came up with that was like completely unrelated to Nintendo. But that'd be kind of interesting. I probably would have put it in anyway, just because there's some spillover there between fans and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there was that, I think it was an April Fool's strip, the PlayStation Battle Royale, whatever it was called.
That's right, the Battle Royale, B period Royale in the family. Yeah, when I made a bunch of comics of just like the Sony characters. Yeah, I had to actually do a little research on that, because I didn't know like a lot of the games that they came from. I played God of War, I played, the first Metal Gear Solid, but like that was about it. So I just thought of various other games, you could make with Parappa the Rapper, and was there Sackboy, I think was one of them. So that was kind of fun. I got to do something a little different there.
So I know I have my favorite comics, History of Nintendo, Ode to Minions. My all-time favorite is Arms Race. I don't know if you remember that one in particular.
Is that with
Bowser
Charizard?
And Charizard? Yes.
Yeah. The Ivysaur, and then they keep one-upping each other.
Yes. So, but a lot of my favorite ones are your musical comics. What was the inspiration behind starting the musical comics?
Those were really fun. Like, those were a lot of work, but I think those are among my favorites as well. That started with, I don't think it was an intentional thing. It initially started with the King Dedede story with the Grinch. Yeah, when he was How the King Stole Christmas. I started making that, and I thought it would be fun to have one of those parts just be the song, or like a parody of the song. And I'm pretty sure that's when it started. And it was like, I didn't know much about programming, so we just, like, me and the guy helping me run the site, Chris, just put the song like to autoplay on the page, so people would visit the page and it would start up, and ideally you would follow along. But like, I remember a lot of people complaining about it because, they'd be in class or whatever, and this "Your main king DDD" started up, and they're just they would get in trouble or whatever. So we started. Eventually, we started making them become videos instead. But that's how it began. It began with that, and Michael and I have always actually been really into music. We're both from a very musical family. He plays the trombone and the guitar. He's learning piano, and I play piano and saxophone. And we both sing, so that was kind of a part. That was something. Once I put that up, I felt this is a good way to kind of have an additional thing to set the comic apart from other webcomics, is having these musical interludes about video game characters. So that's pretty much how that started.
Was Michael featured in any of the songs that were featured in this comic strip?
Michael, did you? I feel like.
I think I did, maybe. I forget what I did. I think I did. I did do.
Well, you drew one.
I did draw one.
You drew two comics.
I did. I did draw.
Can anyone guess the two comics that Michael drew?
They're not very. They're great comics.
Oh wait! I think I remember one of these. I think I do. One of them was the Fire Emblem one with the Dark Knight, and then you like.
Oh no, that's a good guess. That was my friend Chris who was.
That was Chris. I knew it was.
Site. Yeah.
So, yeah.
There was one comic I did on my birthday that I updated every day of that week. Where it was me in comic form saying I didn't feel like making a comic. So everyone else, actually there's two like this. The first one, DDD was going to make the comic, and it was a ridiculous thing. I drew up the outline that I wanted Michael to draw, and then Michael drew it so it looked, a
Different.
little worse.
I added 12 pack to GDD. That was me.
Oh yeah, you did. You added a 12-pack to DDD, so it looked.
Please God.
It was good. So DDD made his own comic and Michael drew that. But the second time was when all of my family members made a comic, and Michael made one about Samus. So Michael made a Metroid one. My sister made one about Mario, and yeah, there were a couple others. My wife made one. So yeah, Michael drew 2 of them. I don't think he sang or played for the songs, from what I remember.
I don't. But Samus is my girl, though. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It always comes from Smash Brothers, where on 64, where I would beat Matthew with Samus.
You would not be Matthew with. It was the Samus and Ness fights that were legendary. It was always up and down, and yep, it's a rivalry that still continues to this day.
I'm just confused because I thought Samus was my girl, so we might need to talk
Yeah.
off the air.
Maybe
after
settle
this.
it in Smash.
So
But Michael, you do hear Michael in several of the Tadpole Treble songs, though.
okay.
Yeah.
So another one of my favorite things that you did was the Waluigi distortion. I don't know, just the exaggeration of his character.
Yeah.
What made you want to take Waluigi specifically and make him so memeable?
Okay, so the Waluigi thing that really took me by surprise, because that became kind of the comic's breakout character more than anyone else, I would say, in terms of just overall reach. It started like I was just talking about, like, keeping everyone in character, but Waluigi I bent the rules a little bit, because how did that begin? Why did I do that? I think I drew a really weird looking Waluigi picture just in my sketchbook, and Chris was looking at my different sketches and he thought it was really funny. And I thought, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. And so he said, you gotta put that in somewhere. And I thought, well, I guess maybe like an April Fool's thing, he'll just show up and say, Waluigi time! And it'll be this really hideous looking Waluigi. And at the time, it's hard to believe now, because this was back in 2009 or whatever. But Waluigi was once just like no one. They're just like, this weird little guy. I remember when Mario Tennis came out in 1999 and they introduced Waluigi, and people were just like, this is kind of dumb, He's like Luigi, but just like they added Wa to it, and it's actually pretty funny. It's a pretty good pun in Japanese, because you have Warui, which means bad, bad person, and then Waluigi, because he's Waluigi. But in English, it's just kind of like Waluigi. It feels weird. So he was pretty unpopular for a while. So that actually made him like a really good candidate for this kind of takeover, because he's just like, I don't know, just this character that's overtly full of himself and has this bizarre sense of humor and thinks he's got this great comic, and it's just someone that everyone's just kind of indifferent towards / doesn't know who he is / doesn't like him. And I just kind of improvised a bunch of different comics, and that became a yearly thing for the most part. And I guess it just took off from there. I think people just started to see that they really did love Waluigi after all. They just didn't see it before, but they understood him after that.
It was a revelation for me.
We did. Glenn and I interviewed Lucas M. Thomas from Nintendo Force Magazine.
Oh yeah, Lucas. Sure.
And he was talking about how at the time you had the upcoming Waluigi issue. So after he said that, my first question was, please tell me Matthew Taranto is heavily involved, because that was awesome. You did a great job.
Yeah. I like working with him with Nintendo Force Magazine. And yeah, I remember that. I remember he wanted a bunch of different like styles of Waluigi for the front. So I drew my main one, but I also drew like a couple others that I ended up using for the book, where he was in like there was like a Simpsons one, and I think a Final Fantasy like a mono artwork one from like the old Final Fantasy games. So that was a lot of fun.
All right, so moving on, we're going to shift gears and start talking about Tadpole Treble. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So first and foremost, how'd you come up with the idea for the project?
Well, that started when it was actually a long time. It was way before Brawl in the Family. I was like a teenager. It's probably around the turn of the century or so. I would watch my dad compose things on this program Finale on his computer, And he's like, he's kind of where we get our musical stuff from. He's a band director, and he's also he's written some musicals himself. So I would watch like the little line go by, and the notes would boo doo 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 doo, and it looked kind of like a video game, because the screen is scrolling, things are coming by, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to have a video game where the notes were the obstacles. And from there, I just kind of thought, if you're moving up and down, maybe like some sort of fish or aquatic creature could be swimming, and avoiding them, and that way you're not bound by gravity. And I think a tadpole was decided on just because I couldn't really think of any notable tadpole characters that existed. You know what I mean? Yeah, frogs, but like tadpoles were kind of unclaimed territory. So I thought, okay, a tadpole. Plus they kind of look like notes, And I think that might have been my Mario RPG history kind of sneaking into my brain. Yeah. And then so I told Michael about this idea, and we had actually been talking about making games for a while just because it was something we always wanted to do. But this one seemed like simple enough to start with. So, we started planning that.
Right. We initially created a demo, Matthew. We created a demo for Brawl in the Family fans. So
yeah, that's
it was a one-level demo. It was pretty much like a small little, virtual slice of the game. And just to see if it works. And we got some positive feedback from it. So once we saw that, we tried to keep it as simple as possible, but it kind of blew out of proportion a little bit. With all
they call it feature creep.
Right, it's feature creep.
Yeah.
Which kills a lot of projects, but it kind of made ours better, so I guess we're happy for it overall.
Yeah, like composition mode was supposed to be a stretch goal initially, like way down the line. But we hit our goal, but we didn't go super far past it. But I really just wanted to put in composition mode, so we're just like, okay, let's put it in. Why not?
Yeah, I was looking back because I recently did a review on Tadpole Treble Encore, and I was kind of looking back on the Kickstarter project, and I noticed you didn't even hit the stretch goal for Wii U, but you still ported it to Wii U. Anyway.
Yep, that was another one of the things we did. So that's probably why the game took so long.
Yeah, we underestimated a lot of things. It being our first game, we underestimated time, we underestimated cost, and scope. All things that a good project needs.
Yeah.
So we definitely learned a lot from it, and it was a lot of growing pains making it.
All right, so kind of going back to. You explained why a tadpole, but I'm kind of curious why the aquatic theme, just in general, as opposed to like a character that could fly or something.
I don't know. I guess we could have used a bird, couldn't we?
That's a good idea.
Sequel.
Glenn's idea. Next one.
I don't know. I think I started getting attached to the tadpole idea pretty early on. I guess because of the sort of subtle musical things that I mentioned, like the shape of it, and we came up with the idea of the tadpole being called Baton, and I like that because the tadpole kind of looks like Baton too, and we both are by the city Baton Rouge, so all that kind of stuff kind of came together, and then I started thinking about like the different like types of water levels. You could have streams, you could have like rapids.
I think we also thought of just continuing the level from like place to place. So we needed like a water like creek or water like system.
Oh, like like a connected area.
Right, to connect the whole, because the entire island or the entire game is connected by one stream essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once we kind of got all those pieces in place, it felt like a natural fit.
All right. So how'd you go about writing the music, and what factors did you have to consider when composing a soundtrack that you wanted for a single, like, History of Nintendo or the like?
Oh, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Well, how is writing music for an entire soundtrack different from writing a singular standalone song?
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things I wanted to do was have these I guess what they're called in the musical world, like leitmotifs. When you have these little phrases or riffs that appear across different songs. A lot of my favorite game soundtracks have that, and it gives it a real sense of cohesion, which I really like. So I try to do, like, just off the top of my head, like Mario Galaxy. does this very short. It's got a very short riff, but it's like that bum 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 bum. You know, it starts off like that. You hear it when you get a star. You hear it in like some of the songs, like Tuck It Away in the soundtrack. Like I think I want to say Melty Molten Galaxy does like boom 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 boom. It's got this whole thing going. I can't remember if that was 1 or 2, but those two games have like two of my favorite soundtracks. So yeah, I want to have something a little similar with the musical feel in this game. So it has kind of that main theme pop up a few times. The do 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 shows up in a few places. The level 1 theme ba-da-da 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 bum, that shows up like in the victory theme. And after a while, after I wrote a few songs, I started really liking this kind of South American style. So I put that like in the map theme, and in the Piranha Jungle has like a variant on it, and Gusty Rapids also does that. So that was kind of how I tried to compose on like, what do you call it, like a macro scale, I guess.
Yeah, it'd be macro.
Macro, yeah, macro. And for each individual level, it was more Michael and I would come up with the idea behind the level first.
A theme, right?
Yeah, and then I write a theme around the theme. So it was difficult. Sometimes we would get stuck, you know. And Michael, what was Midnight Bayou originally? Like there were snails.
It was going to be snails. Escargot and Love.
Escargot, yeah.
Was Midnight Bayou. Escargot and Love.
Escargot and Love. Yeah, it was a sock hop kind of song.
Right.
Yeah, it was like dun 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 dun.
No, that probably would have been a better idea. Now I'm thinking about it.
Well, we used the snails for Thunder Creek, but it stayed a love song. But I think what happened? I think we wanted to change it to where it involved Baton more, so it became a love song about Baton instead of about the snails themselves.
The key for it was to keep each level different and standalone, but also connected, if that makes sense. So, for example, Matthew's motif, Matthew's little homages back to his level 1 and to the main title. They would creep in, but also each level had its own unique theme and its own unique way of playing it. And so we wanted the player to experience that. And so it was hard to come up with new ways with the Tadpole to have fun. But that's kind of what we did. We had to scrape some ideas. Like we had what, Matthew, like an alligator, an oil gator from one for the final boss, for example.
Yeah, we were thinking about a big gator. There was a level inside the eel. Like we had like an innards kind of Jabu belly stage.
Eel's belly. I think it was
Eel's belly.
Right. And then there was one that was a waterfall that was like an homage to Fantasy 3 when you're falling down that waterfall and you're fighting. But you're basically going down a waterfall the entire time. So it'd be like but we took that idea and we swapped it. Instead of going north to south, you went from east to west.
Yeah, you went backwards.
So we did that through Gusty Rapids. So we swapped, the position of play in that particular level.
You know, Michael, when I was playtesting this game for like 2 hours, I would stop a level and everything would keep moving. Have you ever had this
that
happen?
too?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I get to Gusty Rapids and everything's moving the other way, it's like, So I'm hoping we're not freaking out anyone's eyes with this game.
Yeah, I have like this weird kind of sine wave thing happen if I'm like playing it and getting really into it, like trying to get all the bubbles or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the Tetris thing, right? That's a good thing, right?
That's a
thing.
Good. No one's died yet, from at least I know.
Would you like to officially coin it the Tadpole effect?
The Tadpole effect.
Treble effect.
Oh, those are both good.
Or the Taranto effect.
No. We got a lot of T's.
Matthew effect.
Matthew. Just in case it blinds people 2 years after playing Tadpole Treble.
Oh, man.
All right, so what was it like revisiting the game to bring it to Switch?
It was good. I kind of played it to death because of all the play testing. Like every time we got a new build, I would have to make sure it was 100%able, So I would go through and get all the medals. But we knew we wanted to add something to the game, just to give it that extra little push, and that's kind of where the idea for the new level came in. Isle. Michael, you want to talk about Isle?
Sure. We received a lot of feedback from the Steam version and then the Wii U version, and using that feedback, we determined that there was some problems with the final boss. With the first phase, for example, you're supposed to hit wires, and even though we made the wires, we thought pretty good to identify to hit because they're a certain color, they're like a yellowish hue. The players were still having issues, so we determined that we would like to elaborate a little bit more on the final boss. And so we always initially wanted to. In fact, if you hear the final boss in the initial version or even in the Switch version, it talks about like some lore that we wanted to always kind of elaborate on, but we never really had the chance to. So this gave us the opportunity to kind of flesh out that final boss and to kind of give it the backstory that we always knew in our heads, but we never were able to present it to the player. So it was something that it fixed two problems. It expanded upon the final boss, and then it also fixed the wire issue that we were having. The player has to hit a wire at the end of the new level to proceed, and then it sets up the player right at the beginning to start hitting wires. And so watching playthroughs in the Switch version had been a lot easier for me because they're so frustrating when you watch players and they get to the last boss and they're like, what did I do? And I'm like, no, you got to hit the wires, and they can't hear me.
I can't hear you. And they probably recorded it a while ago.
Right. Now for the Switch version, it's like, oh, I got to hit the wires. I'm like, oh, thank God. So I can actually like watch playthroughs now. It doesn't, you know?
Yeah. Well, and Michael said it solved two problems. And one other thing that it kind of helped with was just a lot of people, even when they really like the game, said, it's a little short. It could be a little longer. So we wanted to give like one extra level to at least, give the game a little more of a longer third act, around the time of Saltwater Cape, when you have Coda chasing after you and stuff, you feel like the game's starting to ramp up and get to its climax. We thought having an extra level right between, that and the final stage would help build up everything too.
So just to clarify, Isle wasn't like something that was planned, but you had to cut it for time?
No, we did have levels like that, but I mean, we talked about them, but we eventually went with this because of the mostly because of player feedback, regarding the final boss. So we thought, this would be a good way to do it.
We had ideas that we cut. We like an oil alligator, for example, and we had plenty of ideas that we
were talking about the beaver dam too.
Right, the beaver dam. So
I like that idea because the beaver would throw acorns and he'd smack him back at the beaver, No, it's good. It sounds
talking about Matthew.
I like the beaver idea, but I didn't want to use it because I didn't like Baton just like killing this beaver. It didn't seem like it seemed to go against the spirit of the game a little bit.
That'll be in the third, and that'll be when we reported the PlayStation 5.
Tadpole Rampage.
Right. So, I myself am a programmer, so I gotta get this question out of the way. What engine did you use?
Okay. So we used Unity. So we kept with Unity for it's been about 5 or 6 years, and it's crazy because it's gone through a lot of different Unity versions. So every time we are updating it, obviously little bugs creep in. So we have to take that into account. But Unity for us did what needed to be done for the game. And we didn't need the Unreal Engine, we didn't need anything that was, super graphically pushing. So Unity for us was kind of the way to go.
All right. And we had to update it, right? Like our programmer we couldn't use the same version from the Wii U version.
No, the Wii U version uses a specific version that Nintendo set up that could port to the Wii U using their software. So we couldn't use that anyway, even though it was a particular Unity version. We had to use the more up-to-date, because the Switch version used the more up-to-date Unity. So once we use that, then of course that version becomes obsolete depending upon Nintendo's back office. And so we will constantly have to update it. And that was the issue with us. It's like, as you're trying to make a project or release a product, you have to determine bug fixing. And then if you wait too long, sometimes you need to then update your engine, and that creeps in more bugs. So it's
Yeah.
almost like a weird race, uh, to try to release it before the next version expires, so you can get it out there, and then this way you squash the bugs and before bringing a new version of it.
All right. So speaking of glitches, any amusing, like particularly amusing glitches that came up during development?
There was the one where she starts spinning and flying into the sky and going under the like what was that for the Steam version or the
I mean, there
well, we got rid of that one, I think.
no, yeah, none of these are
Whenever it popped up, I was like, Michael!
retail versions. Like, there is actually one that's there's occasional ones that whenever so baton is on a Y axis, and whenever you jump, you calculate this certain position. Obviously, if something were to interrupt your state in jumping, things could go awry, which means you could typically maybe your Y would typically then start floating up into space.
Oh yeah, that's what happened.
Right, or maybe your state will go from being hit to invincible. That's happened a couple times.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe your costume would change from baton to biton because that state changes. So there are some odd things like that. There were some odd things with the composition mode. It's so tricky to do QR codes and to save songs and QR codes because you use a serial, kind of a sequence of numbers. And a lot of issues cropped up with that just because it's a difficult thing to create. And then the profanity check that the Wii U required was really interesting because you could save songs and then you could also save your files. But then they had to go through a profanity check with Nintendo's filter to make sure that things weren't being saved. So we had to test out all sorts of, wording. Profanity filter was working. And those were interesting because some stuff would go through and we're like, wait, we can't have this just in case something. And then it came really odd. It was like, can we create songs into the shape of absurd, obscene things? With notes, and then it's like, wait a minute, we can't do that either. And so, but there's no way to fix that. So just put that out there. So things like that cropped up. It was an interesting trial and tribulation.
Matthew, you getting upset at Michael is very nostalgic for me. Scott and I partnered with a programmer and a 3D modeler to make a game years ago. It's not playable now, but it was a very interesting time. Like, we play tested it to death, and we come back and say, "Hey Alex, this doesn't work," or "Hey Alex, when this thing happens," and he's like, "Well, just don't get into that situation."
That's the easy solution.
I thought you were just going to say it sounded like Dwight saying, Michael!
Michael! Michael! Bears.
too.
Beats. Battlestar Galactica.
So Tadpole Treble Encore is available on Switch now. It is less than $10. And Glenn just reviewed it. He awarded it the elusive loved it rank, which you haven't given out to any other game yet, right?
That's the first one.
There you go. High recommendation
Nice.
from us.
Well, thank you.
All right. Let's talk about Gamemaster Classified. The
All right.
Kickstarter is going on right now. So if anyone's listening who has yet to back this new book project, do you want to give the pitch real quick?
Sure. Gamemaster Classified is a tell-all book about Nintendo from the 80s during the NES era. I'm doing the illustrations and layouts, and I'm working with Nintendo's own Howard Phillips, the game master himself, who was, he had a lot of jobs. He was Nintendo's, creative director, game creative, which is sort of hard to remember, but he was kind of like one of the big guys in charge. He came up with the Fun Club idea, the Nintendo Power idea. He played thousands of games, I want to say, probably over 1,000. And he was responsible for a lot of the changes and localization things that Nintendo themselves did. So he's telling all about, what life was like back then. I'm making comics about it. I'm making reviews and things, and I'm also going to be reflecting on my own experiences with Nintendo games in separate comics within the book. So it'll be a fun book with a little bit of everything in it.
So to clarify, this is the Howard of Howard and Nestor, correct?
Oh yeah, that's the very same. And it's when we have the comics with him, it's gonna be that that Howard design, because that's the one that people are familiar with, the bow tie and everything.
Yeah, I noticed in like the Kickstarter trailer, you drew yourself having the Nestor bangs.
I'm glad someone caught that. Yeah, when I asked Howard about Nestor, he says we were basically, Nestor was a fictional character, but he was basically any kid playing the NES that felt like they knew it all. They didn't need help. So I thought, we're all Nestor. Let's have a little Nestor nod in there. And if you look closely at the shadow on the cover, you'll see it's very familiar shaped as well.
Well, it sounds fascinating, and I'm sure he has some really crazy stories to tell. Mm-hmm. And it's great that he has such a talented illustrator to help him take it from not just being a regular book to something so fun and interactive and in comic form. So whose idea was this, and how did it come to be?
Well, I feel very lucky about this because, I'm obviously like a very big fan of Nintendo. But it really started a few years ago when I did Nintendo Power was ending, and I made a Brawl in the Family comic with Howard and Nestor. It was a Howard and Nestor tribute. And Howard himself somehow got a hold of it. I guess someone linked him. And he ended up contacting me. I guess the timing was good because he wanted to work on his own project, which was called Know It All, which was a mobile game that he was going to do a Kickstarter for that very year, and wanted me to make some comics about his basically his path to know it all to this point. So like one of the strips was about him working in the warehouse. One of them was about him playtesting the Famicom, and so on. And so I worked with him basically as a freelance artist then, and it didn't hit its goal. It got about a third of the way there, and we basically parted ways, amicable terms and everything. But a couple of years ago, he reached out to me again saying he'd like to make a book now about all his experiences at Nintendo, and was interested in, not just having a text-based book, but one with, a really fun kind of presentation style, illustrations and layouts and comics and things. And I said, that sounds great. I'm not going to say no to Howard Phillips, but I made one suggestion. I said, what if we made it kind of like Nintendo Power, where you have the comics, but you also have each of these different sections with their own kind of look, and you have these headers, and we can kind of have plays on different things. Like classified information could be there with the classic manila folders, but instead of cheat codes, it'd be, secret things from Nintendo. And he really liked that idea, and we've just been hammering it out for a year or so, getting things in order and everything, and that's pretty much the full story.
Wow. You said you've been working on it for about a year?
Yeah, about a year.
Okay, awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think he wants to make this now? Because he's looking back decades into his past career. Is there anything kind of prompting him to say, let's get this project going?
I get the impression that it's something that Howard's been wanting to do for a while. But, previously he's had a long and lucrative career. He worked at LucasArts for a while, and then he worked at Microsoft for a good bit. And I think he's pretty much been in the industry until maybe a decade ago or so. I'm not exactly sure when he officially retired, but at that point he wanted to try his hand at game development, and I think now he's just kind of he thinks the time is right. He wanted to find an illustrator to help him with this, and I guess he feels my style jives well with his memoirs and things. So I guess that's pretty much it. He's at the point where he's ready to write a book about his experiences.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about goals, not necessarily the Kickstarter goals, but for you personally, what would make this book a success for you?
Well, I would like for it to be something that I would really enjoy reading. I feel like I'm basically the target audience here. People that, it doesn't have to be someone that was alive during the NES days, but I think, for people especially that were familiar with Nintendo Power and Howard Phillips and all those NES games and grew up with that stuff, I think having a book that's not just facts, but also a lot of different flavor and It's got all these illustrations and interesting stories and things. If that's a compelling read and it's fun and it's informative, that's really ultimately what I feel would be a success and something I'd be really proud of.
Mm-hmm. So earlier you said I wouldn't say no to Howard Phillips, but now that you've said yes and you're working with him, what is that like?
It's pretty fun. You can tell he is a creative type, because he wasn't like Howard Lincoln, for instance, who was the chairman of Nintendo at the time and their lawyer, and was very business oriented. He's definitely more the creative type. It's funny because sometimes people mix up the two Howards. Like, because they're both do. Howard. Yeah, like someone I kept getting comments on the video that said, "What does Howard Phillips think now that Night Trap is on a Nintendo system?" Yeah. Whereas Howard Lincoln was the one that's like, "Night Trap will never be on a Nintendo system," So, but yeah, it's really fun. We have to kind of keep each other in check since we're both kind of the creative types. And sometimes, one of us would be like, "Oh, it'd be cool if we did this," and then the other one would be like, "Well, yeah, but I mean, market wise, is that the best idea?" kind of thing. So it's sort of funny. There's kind of like, we both have this enthusiasm about the project, but we also have to be, pragmatic about it as well, and not let things get away from us too much or get too ambitious, like I did with Tadpole Treble sometimes. It's composition mode, and Wii U version.
So you're trying to stick to a deadline, not let the features creep too much. When are you hoping to get the book in people's hands?
Well, right now the goal is in 1 year, so February 2022, and I've kind of outlined a plan for myself this year where I basically do one chapter a month, and it should be manageable because all this planning and stuff, a lot of it was just getting the sections in order and me designing each section, and now that we have that basically in place, it's mostly the comics themselves are going to be the bulk of the work for me. So I think it's definitely doable. But I also think the final book should be around, it's probably going to be around 200 pages at this rate based on the stretch goals and stuff that we're hitting.
Awesome. Well, we're really looking forward to reading that. So people can back it now, and I believe it's $19 for digital, $39 for print. Is that right?
That's right. Hardcover and digital, yeah.
Good. And then there's higher tiers for autographs and extra bonuses, things like that. So we encourage you to go check out that Kickstarter. The book is called Gamemaster Classified. And take a look. It looks great. Okay, so I actually just got a message from Sakurai. He messaged me on MySpace.
Nice.
And he says that there are 2 slots left in the Fighter Pass, and he wanted to know who we should have him put in there.
Michael, I'm going to let you pick one.
Oh, good. Well, I think Wart. I like Wart. And, I think the vegetables, you can throw it back. A vegetable medley.
Nice.
It's a counter that specifically only works against that one attack.
Comes in playing an organ, one of those organs that shoot the vegetables out.
I like Wart. I miss him. They should bring him back. It's a solid choice, a nostalgia choice. I would have to say, I think everyone expects me to say Waluigi. But I would like to see Waluigi, But I think my top pick right now would actually be, okay, for a third party pick, I'm gonna go with Phoenix Wright. I love the Phoenix Wright series. I actually was working on a Phoenix Wright musical before Brawl in the Family, and it's very nostalgic to me because that's kind of where people first started paying attention to me, which is kind of nice. And it's also how I met my wife, which is crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were both working on the musical, it was an online thing together, among other people, and that's how we met. But I also think the series is great, and it would be a really fun character that would be very dynamic and interesting, I think. For a first party character, though, I would say I'm really a big fan of unrepped series getting their due. I feel like we're long overdue for either Advance Wars or Rhythm Heaven, or I really want to see Pig Ganon. I don't know. I'm listing like 4 characters here. Like, I associate Ganon with the big blue, monster Ganon. Like, I grew up on the original Zelda and everything, and he's just such an iconic character. And I like Ganondorf, but I think Ganondorf's in 3 Zelda games as opposed to like 10 for the other Ganon. Y'all can count them, I'm telling you. There's Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time have Ganondorf. Not counting Hyrule Warriors. And then for Pig Ganon, you got Zelda 1, Zelda 2, he's kind of in there. He goes, "Wah, wah, wah, wah," when you get a game over. Yeah, Link to the Past. You got he's in Ocarina of Time as well. He's in shadow form in Link's Awakening. That's 5. He's in 4 Swords Adventures. He's in this is probably a lot of spoilers. I'm going to stop. But the point is, he's in a lot of games. He's in a lot. So, those of you who don't want me to ruin the entire Zelda series, do not listen to 1 minute ago. But yeah, those would be my picks, I think.
Okay, good. I'll let him know.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Michael, you finished porting Tadpole Treble. It passed the profanity checks. It's on Switch. What's next for you? What's in your future?
Well, we probably are going to do Europe next, so we're probably going to port it to Europe, hopefully.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of people that are asking for that.
And then hopefully Asia. Right now it's currently just out in America. That's the current. Probably the future would be another IP, hopefully. We have a couple ideas. We had a couple pitches, but we've been focused on Tadpole Treble in the port that, we just really haven't been able to be focused on a new IP, but it would be probably something new, probably a new project.
Yeah, the thing about us is that we were working on Tadpole Treble like part-time, like Michael was doing his own job, I was doing my own job at the same time, and we're kind of still in that place right now. Like, now I'm working on the book and Michael's teaching, so we still meet up and discuss game ideas and work on Tadpole Treble and stuff, but it's also something that's it's a little trickier for us because we're kind of juggling a lot of different things at once.
Anything else for you, Matthew, on your horizon? Obviously, you've got your hands full for the next year with chapter a month, but any other projects that you're looking forward to getting to?
There is kind of a secret project that I was going to do after the Waluigi book until Howard contacted me, but that will probably need to be a 2022 thing.
Okay.
But that's all I'm saying. It's not a sequel or follow up to anything I've done, but I think if you like the stuff I've done, it's kind of all of that together. So that's all.
Okay.
I'll say.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, anything final you'd like to add, or as well as let people know where they can follow you and your projects online?
You can follow me at Matthew P. Taranto on Twitter, or you could just go to brawlinthefamily.com. And you could also go to bitfinitygames.com as well for Tadpole Treble and Bitfinity related things. And Ness is always going to beat Samus in Smash Brothers.
Ooh.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
But also you can get us on Facebook. Tadpole Treble's on Facebook. And Twitter, it'll be Mike Taranto or
Mike Taranto.
Matthew, right? Don't you have a Twitter?
Yeah, I said it. Matthew P. Taranto. Or Mike, is it Mike _Taranto? Gotta have that little thing.
Yeah, I think there's an underscore, sure.
You gotta have the thing there. Put the thing there.
But hopefully, our Samus lovers will understand that Samus is the superior special.
See, I can't wade into this discussion because Scott plays both of those characters and I don't play either of them. So
that's fun.
Both of them are frustrating for me to fight.
To be fair, Super Metroid is my favorite game, so there's that.
Yep.
It's classic.
Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for making the time to come here and let us pick your brains about all of your projects. We really enjoyed it and hope people go check out your game, your book, and comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for featuring us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you guys.
All right. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
See y'all later.
Bye.